working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines. Citing difficult times and challenges caused by the pandemic crisis, President Marcos has ordered PhilHealth to defer the increase of premium rate and income ceiling that was slated this year. And President Marcos Jr. will not be meeting the Filipino community in China due to the COVID situation in that country.
China is actually very
And the strengthening of bilateral ties will be front and center of President Marcos Jr.'s state visit to Beijing beginning today. And hundreds of rescuers in Vietnam are battling to free a 10-year-old boy who fell into a 35-meter deep hole at a construction site 2 days ago. First in our news, Malacanang has ordered the Philippine Health Insurance Corp, or PhilHealth, to defer the increase of premium rate and income ceiling that was slated this year. It cited difficult times and challenges caused by the pandemic. A memorandum released from the Office of the President, signed by Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin, ordered the deferral of a scheduled hike in the PhilHealth premium rate from 4% to 4.5% and income ceiling from 80,000 pesos to 90,000 for 2023. PhilHealth earlier argued that the looming 4.5% increase in premium would help the state-run insurance corporation to sustain the level of benefits enjoyed by its members. The UHC law mandates increases in member premiums by 0.5% every year starting in January 2021 until it reaches its 5% limit in 2025. In January 2021, former President Duterte directed PhilHealth to defer the hike amid the health crisis. And President Marcos will not be meeting the Filipino community in China due to the COVID-19 situation in that country. President Marcos will leave for China for today, January 3, for his first state visit there. During the pre-departure briefing, Foreign Affairs Assistant Secretary Neil Imperial said there will be no meeting with the Filipino community in this trip. Meeting with the Filipino community has been a regular feature of the president's foreign trips thus far. Now, according to the World Health Organization, there are 28,494 new reported cases of COVID in China in the last 24 hours. The strengthening of bilateral ties will be front and center of President Marcos Jr.'s state visit to Beijing beginning today. Talks would include cooperation in terms of economy, trade, and investment, most likely maritime security. Let's listen in.
China is actually very important player. If we try to look at it, it's the second world's largest economy, and it has a GDP of more than 9%. It's actually one of the top performing countries in terms of global production, sa larangan din ng manufacturing, value chain systems, and everything else. Lahat halos ng produkto na meron tayo sa merkado, makikita natin, ay nagmumula talaga sa bansang China. So this, I think, ang lalamanin talaga ng kanilang pag-uusap dito will actually focus more on the economic bilateral aspects ng kanilang pag-uugnayan itong dalawang bansa. Napakahalaga rin ng China sa ASEAN for the fact that China remains to be one of the preferred trading partners of many ASEAN countries, and ASEAN as a whole, as a regional trading bloc, talagang malaki yung ating nakukuhang benepisyo sa pagkakakalakalan natin sa China. So I think these are some of the things that we will be looking into, how we could broker further investments, further economic patterns na masasabi natin na magbibigay sa atin ng benepisyo, not only in the short term but more so in the long run.
With both President Marcos and Chinese President Xi Jinping getting fresh mandates from recent elections, there is an expectation that the state visit will set the tone for bilateral relations between the two countries for years to come. The bilateral agreements to be signed during his state visit to China include trade and investment, agriculture, energy, infrastructure, people-to-people exchanges, and maritime security. Philippine National Police Chief General Rodolfo Azurin ordered the Firearms and Explosives Office, or FEO, to revoke the gun licenses of those involved in indiscriminate firing during the holiday revelries. Take a look. As I have warned at the onset of the holiday security operations, criminal liability for indiscriminate firing is further aggravated if the offender belongs to the uniformed services. The chief FEO is directed to consolidate the names of those who violated the law on firearms use and to cause the revocation of their licenses without delay, likewise to initiate the filing of appropriate criminal cases, according to Azurin in a statement. Colonel Rodrigo Maranan, chief of the PNP Public Information Office, said 3 cases of indiscriminate firing in Iloilo, Manila, and Quezon City were recorded from December 31st last year to January 1 this year. A member of the PNP Special Action Force was relieved from his post due to indiscriminate firing in Barangay Tuwao, North Bagabag, Nueva Vizcaya last December 30. Maranan said aggressive law enforcement operations resulted in the arrest of 3 suspects for alleged indiscriminate firing during the New Year celebration, 2 civilians and a member of the Philippine Coast Guard. Azurin also said the recent celebration of the holiday season was generally peaceful throughout the country with no significant incidents reported. In tonight's other news, the political party headed by jailed Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi condemned her latest sentence and said on Saturday it would continue to oppose the junta whose court imposed it. The junta-appointed judge did not respect the law. Take a look. The National League for Democracy's NLD Central Committee said in a statement, Win Myint and Aung San Suu Kyi worked for development in the country during the time they were in power, and they worked according to the law. Now, Suu Kyi was handed a 7-year jail term for corruption on Friday in the last of a slew of trials in a junta court that rights groups have said were a sham. The Nobel laureate, 77 years old, has now been sentenced to a total of 33 years in prison. Former President and Suu Kyi ally Win Myint received the same sentence last Friday. The military has cited alleged widespread voter fraud during elections in November 2020, which were won resoundingly by the NLD as a reason for its coup, which sparked huge protests and a bloody crackdown. International observers said at the time the polls were largely free and fair. The NLD was decimated by the February 2021 coup, with many senior members in hiding or in jail. Meanwhile, hundreds of rescuers in Vietnam battling to free a 10-year-old boy who fell into a 35-meter deep hole at a construction site 2 days ago. Take a look. The boy named Tali Lee Hao Nam fell into the shaft of a hollow concrete pillar, just 25 centimeters wide, sunk as part of a new bridge in southern Dong Thap province, apparently while looking for scrap metal. According to media reports, rescuers have tried drilling and softening the surrounding soil to try to pull the pillar up to save Nam. Authorities are not sure about the current condition of the boy. He has stopped interacting with the outside, though oxygen had always been pumped into the hole, according to the Vietnamese Thu Tre newspaper. On Monday, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh asked federal-level rescuers to join efforts by local authorities to save the 10-year-old boy. In tonight's other news, Singapore's economy grew more than expected last year, but much slower than in 2021, according to official data, as analysts warned of weaker growth ahead, owing to an expected recession in key markets. Last year's growth beat the 3.5% expected by the government, but was half the 7.6% rise enjoyed in 2021. Take a look. While the slight performance suggests some resilience in economic activities for now, the overall trend remains on the downside, according to Yip Junrong, market analyst at online trading firm IG, in a note. Meanwhile, research house Capital Economics said it expects exports to fall further on expectations the global economy would enter a recession this year. Elevated interest rates, declining household savings, and high inflation are likely to drag on domestic demand, it added. Meanwhile, Song Seng-won, a regional economist with CIMB Private Banking, told AFP the Singapore economy, though faced headwinds, did well enough, but the outlook is cautious given that we are such a trade-dependent economy. While the 3.8% on-year expansion was welcome, it was weighed by a 3% contraction in the key manufacturing sector in the final 3 months. Growth in the fourth quarter came in at 2.2%, sharply down from 4.2% in July to September, according to advanced estimates by the Trade Ministry. Exports for computer chips and other products have been hit by softer global demand caused by surging inflation and sharp increases in interest rates. The city-state's economic performance is often seen as a useful barometer of the global environment because of its reliance on trade with the rest of the world. Cambodian Premier Hun Sen ordered the creation of conservation zones on the Mekong River to protect critically endangered dolphins after 3 were killed by fishing nets and lines last month. The Irrawaddy dolphins, known for their bulging foreheads and short beaks, once swam through much of the mighty Mekong, but in recent decades have been limited to a 190-kilometer stretch from northeast Kratie province to the border with Laos. Speaking at a ceremony in Kratie, Prime Minister Hun Sen ordered authorities to set up floating markers around designated protection zones in which there will be an absolute ban on all fishing. He said the Mekong River, which is home to near-extinct dolphins and fish species, must be well managed so that dolphins will not die from entanglement in gill nets. Gill nets are nets strung across parts of the river to snare fish. 3 healthy breeding-age dolphins died within a week of each other last month. The deaths alarmed conservationists who called for both day and night patrols in order to protect the remaining dolphins from being killed by illegal fishing. 11 dolphins died in 2022, bringing the total number of dead dolphins to 29 in the last 3 years. According to the World Wildlife Fund, or Cambodia, WWF Cambodia is home to the largest population of Irrawaddy dolphins, which are also found in rivers and lakes in Myanmar, Indonesia, India, and Thailand. Now, for a while, let's look beyond the region now, turning now to the war in Ukraine, where the whole world has been affected from energy, food to inflation. Russia tonight acknowledging that Ukraine killed dozens of its troops. While Ukraine puts the number in the hundreds, Russian Defense Ministry says only 63 Russian soldiers died. Newly recruited Russian soldiers were killed. Take a look.
Российским режимом нанесен удар 6 реактивными снарядами системы залпового огня «Хаймерс» производства США по пункту временной дислокации одного из подразделений российских вооруженных сил в районе населенного пункта Макеевка Донецкой Народной Республики. В результате поражения 4 ракетами с фугасной головной частью пункта временной дислокации погибло 63 российских военнослужащих.
Ukraine's single deadliest attack against Russia in months, using American-supplied HIMARS rockets to level this vocational college that Russia had been using as barracks when moving its troops to the east. Earlier in the day, the Strategic Communications Department of Ukraine's armed forces said nearly 400 Russian troops were killed in Makiiva. Still, Russia is firing back. Far from the front lines, Kiev's mayor said air defenses have shut down 39 Russian drones that swarmed the capital overnight. Russia has launched these attacks since the fall, usually around once a week. But now they are daily. Russian strikes across Ukraine on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day killed at least 5 people and wounded dozens. President Zelensky's office said Ukraine and the European Union will hold a summit in Kiev on February 3 to discuss financial and military support. More news beyond the region. Emergency crews and workers at the scene of a collision between two helicopters that killed 4 on Australia's Gold Coast. A British couple were among the dead in the mid-air collision. The collision that left 2 mangled helicopters on a sandbank near an Australian tourist hotspot, investigators said. And here's Angus Mitchell, ATSB Chief Commissioner. Take a listen.
Yesterday at around 2 o'clock local time, we've had 2 helicopters that have been operating out of SeaWorld, both undertaking a tourist joy fly experience, have collided mid-air. Now that's a couple of 100 metres from the landing pad at SeaWorld and probably at 200 or 300 metres in the air. What we do know at this very early stage of the investigation is that 1 helicopter was taking off. That's had 7 people on board. Another one coming into land with 6 people on board. Now, they've collided. The 1 helicopter, at this stage, we've got 4 people who have tragically lost their lives. Another 3 are in a very serious condition in hospital. The second helicopter coming into land, now that has remarkably managed to land upright. And considering the damage that was done to the front left-hand section of that helicopter where the pilot was sitting, that's been a remarkable achievement. So whilst it has been very tragic that 4 people have lost their lives and many families are mourning this morning, we could have had a far worse situation here, and the fact that that 1 helicopter has managed to land has been quite remarkable.
I saw the 2 helicopters just as they were about to crash. I saw one of them from underneath. Seemed like he came up and hit the bottom of the other one on the top. I don't know if they were both trying to land at the same time or what they were trying to do. And then I just heard this loud bang and just pieces, shrapnel flying everywhere.
Now, both helicopters were operating out of SeaWorld, according to Mitchell, a popular theme park, and 2 British nationals believe. Seoul and Washington are discussing joint planning and exercises involving U.S. nuclear assets to counter growing threats from the north. That, according to South Korea's presidential office today, after U.S. President Joe Biden said there would be no such joint drills. The statement was released after President Biden said the United States was not discussing joint nuclear exercises with South Korea, seemingly contradicting comments by Seoul's President Yoon Suk-yeol earlier this week. Now, President Yoon's office said the 2 security allies are in talks over information sharing, joint planning, and the joint implementation plans that follow with regard to the operation of U.S. nuclear assets to respond to North Korea's nuclear weapons. In an interview with the Chosun Ilbo newspaper published Monday, President Yoon said the U.S. existing nuclear umbrella and extended deterrence were no longer enough to reassure South Koreans. Hours after that interview was published, President Biden gave an emphatic no in response to a question on whether the 2 sides were considering joint nuclear exercises. President Yoon's office acknowledged President Biden's response, but said the U.S. president had been left with no options but to answer no when directly asked without any context. The back and forth comes after the North's leader Kim Jong-un called for an exponential increase in his country's nuclear arsenal and new intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, to counter what it termed U.S. and South Korean hostility. In 2022, the North conducted sanctions-defying weapons tests nearly every month, including firing its most advanced ICBM ever. Finally, Mio Asenas from our EBC Hawaii Pacific Bureau takes us on a walking tour through downtown Honolulu while highlighting the events of the past year in her part of the world. Let's join her.
Street is one of the oldest streets in Honolulu, located between Ala Moana Boulevard and Beretania Street. Measuring about 2,000 feet or 0.6 kilometers, 4th Street eventually became the shopping district of Honolulu between the 1800s and 1950s. In 1968, the city government converted 4th Street into a pedestrian mall.
Now that we're here, let's go for a walk as we look back at the biggest stories of 2022 in this part of the world. Let's go. tuned for more right here on Eagle News. From Honolulu, Hawaii, I'm Miwa Senas. We live in extraordinary times.
Thanks, Mio. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast of ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.